Hi guys, and welcome to my plant channel, Chlorophyll is the New Black. My name is Carla, and for whoever is new, this plant channel talks about plant care and also plant projects. Today I'm going to do a care collaboration video about Vandas and how I care for them. If you are not familiar about the Carecollab videos, these videos show different people around the world with different setups taking care of the same type of orchids. So if you're interested to check other channels that are also sharing their tricks and tips, you can see the participating channels on the screen, and you will also see the link to their videos in the description below. Now I want to tell you how I actually go around Vandas, and in this case this is my pride and joy no ID hybrid that I love and flowers very reliably for me. So I want to tell you where I keep it, how I care for it, and I hope this works to grow your orchid. So I have my Vanda in my kitchen that is a southwest exposure, so now it's 2 p.m. You can see that the sun hits it a bit. And actually, nicely, now since we had a little bit of sun, I have seen that it has gotten some tinges. So if you observe here, now you can see those purple dots on the leaves, and also that the leaf is getting purple. That is anthocyanin, that is a pigment that the orchid develops to protect themselves from light. That doesn't mean that the orchid is burning, it means that it's receiving enough light. Of course, we have to be careful that they are accustomed to light and as well that they don't get burned, but this orchid has been here for a couple of years now, so it is fine, it has flowered just fine, and it is doing great. Now, as you can see, I have it potted. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about morphology and also a little bit about care. So this orchid, well, it's a Vanda orchid, it's a hybrid. So I bought it, it didn't even have a name. It has just these beautiful purple flowers that are, I don't know if the parent is the Pachara or so, but the flowers last quite a bit and they are so showy, beautiful and big. So this orchid was actually bigger, but I had to cut it because it had an infection, but I will tell you a little bit more about it later. But talking about morphology, as you can see, it is a monopodial orchid. It has a main stem from where roots and also leaves come out. So this is the crown where basically new leaves continue emerging. Now, as you can see, the orchid is tilting a bit on that direction. So it actually is facing or turning towards the sun. This also happens because in winter we have almost no sun or almost no light. So then the orchid tries to reach into the sun, and then that's why it got a little bit tilted. So what you can do to avoid this is constantly rotate a little bit the pot so that it doesn't go completely into that direction. But if you don't mind, then of course it's not a problem. So I have it potted. My medium of choice is sphagnum and bark, and I have it in a terracotta pot. Before I had it bare rooted, but it was very difficult for me to keep it hydrated, or well, properly hydrated. So I would have at that time, because my house, well, apartment is very dry, to water it every day, and I was not, it was too complicated for me. I didn't have time. So at some point, it actually developed an infection because I was watering it a little bit careless, and I had to cut it, and basically half of the orchid was gone. It lost all the leaves in the bottom, but luckily I still had one root, and from one root I actually managed to rehabilitate the orchid into now, like you can see all the roots that it has going around. And also something that I find funny is that the roots are mostly growing like away from the light. So that's a common behavior of orchids that are epiphytes, because normally the sun, if you consider that they attach to trees, normally the tree trunk will be the most shaded part. So they want to attach, the roots wants to attach to the tree trunk, therefore they will go to a little bit more shaded part, that is in this case here, because the sun comes in this direction, as you can see. So yeah, I have a lot of roots just coming in this direction, quite large. Now, talking about care, Oh, well, something else that I wanted to say is like this new root tip that is coming out just here. As you can see, it's purple, and that is also due to the good light that it's receiving. So that's actually pretty great. And the other thing is, I don't know if I can catch it on camera, but it looks like something is swelling. So I see something developing in here. Yeah, it's not very, yeah, probably you cannot see it, but there's a knob there developing, so probably it's going to be a flower spike in there. So now talking a little bit about general care of the orchid. Well, as I mentioned before, it's monopodial, it is an epiphyte orchid, and they love bright light. And many times when you have a Vanda and it hasn't flowered, it's because you are not giving it enough light. And that is very important factor for Vandas to flower, to get enough light. So Vandas come normally from warm climates, therefore your orchid will grow the best and develop the best in rather warm conditions and bright light. They don't care much about humidity as long as you can keep them well hydrated. And they tolerate to go bone dry, but I would recommend you to let them dry out before every watering, but not let it dry for too long, because if that happens, then the root tips that you can see there will dry out, and maybe the whole root may dry out completely if it doesn't receive any water. So this orchid consumes quite some water, so I have to water it normally like 2 or 3 times a week because yeah, as you can see, well, it receives quite some sun, and it dries out pretty fast, and it's a big girl. So yeah, I water it 2 to 3 times a week, but it will as well depend on your climate and where you have your orchid located, how often you have to water. So my advice would be to water it every time that you see that the pot is completely dry, so that you allow for air to fill into all the pockets after the water is consumed. These orchids love air in their root system, so you don't want it to have all the pockets all the time full with water and soggy, because it will suffocate the roots and the roots will die. So it's very important to keep airy media. That's why I'm also using that very chunky bark when you have your orchid potted. Of course, you can have it in different setups, but this is the setup that accommodates better for me and that I have to water less often, because I have so many orchids that it would be very difficult for me to water 400 orchids every 2 days, every 3 days or so on a week, because yeah, I also work, and yeah, it takes quite some time to take care of them. So the flowers of this one are beautiful. I would put a picture on the screen. They are this vibrant and saturated purple, and I just love the flower. These ones can flower like up to 3 times or so a year if you give it warm conditions and enough light and good care. Mine normally flowers 1 to 2 a year. So yeah, I'm actually very happy about that, because as I mentioned, I live in the Netherlands, so there is not much light all year around, so therefore it just doesn't flower as often. As well, you can see that it is at a window, but I don't supplement extra light, so it just gets enough light from the sun, not by any other source. These orchids, compared to Phalaenopsis, they normally don't have a trick to bloom them like the Phalaenopsis. Many Phalaenopsis you can just give them like this cool down of 10 degrees to trick them into blooming. But these orchids, the better appropriate conditions you give them, that's when they will actually bloom more often. These orchids are also prone to produce cakeys, not from the flower spikes like Phalaenopsis, but rather from the stem. So this one I don't have any cakeys, but many Vandas do produce cakeys, and as well the older the Vanda, they are actually the more prone to produce cakeys. Yeah, so just to summarize, water the orchid when it is completely dry. Don't keep it soggy. Keep the medium very airy, because they like to have a lot of air in the roots so that they don't suffocate. They are warm growers, so you have to have them in temperatures like from 15 to 40 degrees, but rather in the warm side. They can withstand, as you can see, like direct sunlight, but it's better to accustom them, otherwise you can burn them. Light, they need very bright light, otherwise they won't flower. And as you can see here, well, sometimes some of them, especially these orchids that do like reddish or purple flowers, will develop anthocyanin pigment, like you can see it here, if you give them enough sun. They don't care much about humidity as long as you keep them well hydrated. And they can flower many times a year if you, well, it also depends which type of orchid you have, but this type of hybrids, they can flower up to several times a year. Something that I almost forgot to say is that I regularly fertilize my orchid. So I have a couple of low release fertilizer in the media. When I reported it, I actually place them there. So I have like, let's say 10 of 17, 17, 17. But that doesn't substitute fertilizer. I still fertilize it every 2 weeks with an orchid fertilizer that I buy in my garden center, and I follow the instructions from the label. And of course, lastly, you can decide how do you want to keep your Vanda. Normally you buy them and they are bare rooted, but I normally like to have them potted because that works for me and allows me to hydrate the orchid more properly and water less times a week. So I hope these tips help you to grow your Vanda and make it flower very often. Thank you for watching. I hope that all the tips and tricks are helpful. And if you have any question, please leave it in the comments below. Again, if you would like to join a collaboration video like this, you can also contact me or contact Nina from Ninja Orchids. I will leave her contact below in the description. And you can also check all the other channels to see how people grow Vandas around the world. As well, if you like this channel, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for notifications every time that I upload a video. And I also have an Instagram account where I post all my orchids in flower. That is Chlorophyll is the New Black. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!